So
Fuck you.
that's the game's audio, not me saying that. There isn't that much sound in this game, but yeah, it's enough to maybe be considered, audio. So I want to watch some more of these. They're funny. Yeah, this is the one I remember being like proud of because I just grabbed some GIF from the internet and loaded it in. You see a $20 bill in your dresser. Okay, so it says I'm hungry. So if you do not eat in the time that time bar runs out, you'll be in trouble. So here's the fridge. I'm gonna cook some soup. So you put the soup on the stove to the left. It'll be ready in 12:07. Remember that an overcooked meal is a fucking fire hazard. So I'll tell you right now. I miss having the time to make these kind of games. It was really fun, like back when I did this stuff. So I'll tell you right now, if I don't get to that soup by 12:07, if I don't get to it by 12:07, it will blow up and catch the entire house on fire, and I'll lose. So I'll be dead. See later too. Here it goes. Eat. So you can throw the food in the fucking trash. That's an option. If you do that, you're pretty dumb because then you can't. Just eating. Then you can't make it again, and then you'll starve to death. So I give you a lot of opportunities to do really, really screwed up shit in this game. I'm actually surprised that I'm streaming this. This game also uses a tile map editor, because so I finished eating. I'm gonna hump the table. If you hump the table 3 times, it breaks. Just like the bed. Back when I made this game, I wasn't very good with graphics, so the way I could make these kind of levels was just to use tile maps and repeat tiles and use this tile map editor that I found online. So, Jesus. And if you crash the car into the house, it blows up and you kill yourself. So that's not a good thing to do right now. I'm gonna drink something. I'm drinking something at the broken table there. So. Alright, so I did that. So pretty much the only thing I have to wait... I think when I made this game, I tried to make enough events in the time period so that it doesn't get too boring, but at the same time, I had to stretch it out for a half hour, and this was never a game that I meant to put online or a game that I meant to sell or anything like that. It basically was something I think I made in the course of like a week for my buddy, and I was only ever going to give it to him and have him play it. But like most of my friends and most of my games at the time, most of my games were too hard to figure out, and most of my friends, I guess, just didn't have the patience, or maybe they didn't care. So when I would give my friends these games, a lot of times they wouldn't be able to beat them, so they would only see maybe like a little bit of them, and then they wouldn't finish them. So sometimes I would walk them through and just show them what's supposed to... Oh. I farted in the game. I forgot about that. I might do that. So that's the secret. If you go to this thing and hit right, it sends it out there and then opens the path to the outside, and now you can go outside. You can't leave. That would be too much. So I can walk around. I don't want to get too far away from the house, because I think if you have to go to the bathroom, I don't know if you have enough time to walk back to the toilet before it's too late. Yeah, you have to see. Look at how fast that is. I would never have had enough time. If you piss your pants, you lose. So I could use the toilet, but in this game, you're actually able to piss in the sink. So there I am, pissing in the sink. Pissed in the sink. So I'm not going to take that bath because I think, yeah, so here you go. You have to take a shit. Okay, you can't crap in the tub and you can't crap in the sink. So here I go, take a shit. Jesus. Oh God. All right. So there I went. I think you can flush. Yeah, you could flush. Okay. So I don't know if I need the bathroom anymore, but if I press this button, like I said, it locks the bathroom and you can't unlock it, and then you're screwed. So I'm not going to do that right now. It'd take me like at least 2 hours to show you guys everything that can go wrong in this game, because I'd have to start it over. So one of the cool ideas... Oh, the song's over. Well, whatever. I guess I didn't repeat the MIDI files. So this is like a secret fridge over here, and you can drink beer. I can't look at this for too long because it makes me really sick the way I programmed this. I'll show you guys this effect later if you're curious. All I did was mirror the rendering of the screen to a secondary like back buffer, and then I draw that back buffer on top with like a semi-transparent blend mode, and I use a sine wave to shake it back and forth. This was the extent of it says you're drunk up there, by the way, you can't read it. This was the extent of my my maths. Just, that makes me so dizzy. I get so motion sick from that. I remember back when I wrote it, I was like, holy crap, how did I make something this terrible? Screw up. So this is Pong, which is actually really cool. I programmed Pong with really crappy, ridiculous sound effects. This is probably the coolest thing in this game, is that I have a game within a game. So yeah, I just took my logic from a Pong game. It was like one of the first games I made when I learned how to code. I took the logic from Pong and I embedded it into this game, and the idea is that you're playing it on that computer. So there's Pong, and this was cool because at this time I was pretty green, like on C++. So this was one of the things that kind of sold me on C++ being a cool language, because I was able to embed and encapsulate all the logic of the Pong game in its own class, and then just call that class from the outer game. And I thought that was really cool that I could do that. And I learned C before I learned C before I learned C++. So doing something like this in C would have been a little bit harder, and it would have made not as much sense in the language, you know. So it's actually kind of cool that I'm able to run a Linux game on my Mac like this with VMware. I thought I would never be able to run these again without having to like dust off my really old half-broken computer. So I'm just trying to beat this guy. I think I made this kind of hard. No, maybe not. The AI for this was really stupid. I just make him go up and down randomly when he gets close to the ball. So there's that one-off chance that you could that he could miss. Oh shit, I missed. Yeah, if anybody wants to learn kind of really well-rounded, basic kind of beginner programming skills, I recommend trying to program a Pong game, simply because there's a lot of little complexity in there for a beginner, like how do you bounce the ball on the edges, right? Like how do you deal with the math for that, or how do you deal with a concave paddle so that when you strike the ball towards the outside, it bounces more on the outside versus, you know, just bouncing directly off the paddle. So that's some dynamics to the game. How do you program the scoring? How do you deal with the AI, like I just said? Because it's really easy in Pong to make an AI that's impossible to beat, that's too hard. So you kind of have to dumb them down a little bit to make it entertaining as a video game and not too hard. These sound effects are ridiculous. I just want to finish this game out. Besides, I think the score is to 7. I don't think I've programmed any other events for the next minute or so anyway. They'll show up. The background game, unless I screwed up, is still running. So if something was to happen, like I get hungry again, it would tell me in the upper left-hand corner. There we go. I won. But this game's still near and dear to my heart because it's just so stupid, and I really like the fact that it's something that it's not. Oh shit, I'm hungry again. So you can't cook food again. I have to go fat. Yeah, I cooked all the soup. That's all there is. So you can't cook again, right? So you have to order a pizza from the phone. Order a pizza. If I be stupid, I piss him off and the pizza doesn't come. 7 minutes. So the door will ring. If I don't answer the door, he gets pissed off and he never comes back. So there's multiple ways to screw up ordering the pizza. You could either piss him off when you call him. I think this random number thing is like... Jesus. Yeah, I cycle through random messages here, like random scripts. Jesus. Do it back when I made this game. I didn't understand the math yet. Oh shit, that's really, really fast. Hold on. Someone's at the door. Pay the pizza man. See that little timer? This is like crazy. Okay. Get the... Take it. But yeah, at the time I made this game, I didn't know how to do 3D yet, but I was still really into 3D games. That was my goal. So I paid the pizza man in time. I'm good. I think this is the last thing that could go wrong. You might have to go to the bathroom after eating, but these last 5 minutes are pretty easy. I'm amazed I beat this, actually. This is... If you do not know what to do, you will fuck this game up and you will lose. You know, because I used to wear like a lot of skater clothes and stuff. Oh, I forgot about this. I actually... Jesus. I actually made note of everything wrong you did. Oh, wow. I forgot that I actually did this. That's cool. I actually used a, I actually used a Chrono Trigger song for the credits. I used to love coding the credits because I would actually... That was kind of like my, wow, the game is done. You know, like, I could relax. I felt like I accomplished something whenever... I would never let myself program the credits for a game. I would never let myself program the credits for a game unless the game was done, because it was kind of like a reward. And because I had so many games that I abandoned, yeah, I mean, it was an accomplishment to actually finish one. F-Blend, I remember that. That was a fancy blending library that was more performant than the one that came with Allegro, which was the game library that I used to make all this stuff. I could talk a lot about Allegro, actually. Wow, I can't believe I put some of these names on here. Some of these people don't deserve to be on here. I think I just quit the game after this. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys the car, and then I'm going to actually go through some actual code. So there's a chance something might have gone wrong, because usually after this there's a crash, maybe? No, I think we're good. So let me show you what happens when you do something wrong. I'm not going to show you everything that can go wrong, because fuck, that would take forever, but... First thing I'm going to do is lock myself out of the bathroom. But that's not even going to matter because I'm basically going to drive the car and kill myself. So it's the arrow keys, which I have mapped to the D-pad. I don't know what the hell I was... Oh, I think I got stuck. Yeah, the collision detection is not very good. So I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I think I was just trying to make something really stupid. But there's not enough room to drive around, so... Yeah, so there we go. You blew up the car. You fucking caught the house on fire. Yeah. Well, anyway, if I see anything pop up over here, I will make note of it and comment. So I'm not going through everything because those credits didn't lie. This is like a 3,000 line game. So back then, I don't program like this anymore. I have a different style and stuff, but back when I made this game, typically what I would do is I would have all the main setup in a file that was named after the game. So I guess this would be called life.cpp. Oh, this is weird. I'm not used to Ubuntu. There it is. So everything will usually live in a file like this. And typically I would have like an init function, and this would set up all the Allegro stuff for me, which was basically, you know, setting up Allegro, setting up the timer. I don't use the joystick in this game, which is why I had to map it with the keyboard. But yes, setting that up. I would set up the MIDI stuff. The MIDI had to be emulated on Linux, which luckily still works. Emulated using regular sound fonts. I'd set the graphics mode. This game was in 640 by 480, which most of the games I made back then were. I would create this little back buffer thing, which is a software back buffer. Everything I would do would render to this, and then I would blit this to the screen every time I wanted to update the frame. It's really kind of interesting because you'll see, like in my Learn C videos, I don't program like this anymore. This was back when everybody still did software rendering, and things like OpenGL or DirectX for using 3D graphics hardware to render 2D games wasn't done back then. And I kind of miss it because it is a little easier to work with pixels directly and not worry about like textures and filtering and all that. The 3D games tend to make 3D APIs tend to make even 2D games look too modern, in my opinion. And there have been times where I wanted to go back to this style of making games simply because there's kind of a nostalgic feel to working directly with pixels. But nonetheless, I digress. So that was the setup for this. The game library that I used for this is called Allegro. It's almost, especially this version of it, is almost completely defunct. Nobody really uses Allegro anymore. It was really easy to use, and that's why I liked it back then, and it taught me a lot. But nowadays, almost everybody uses SDL instead. And SDL is a way more modern version has a lot of the same bells and whistles. With that caveat, I said that it uses the graphics hardware to render. So that was the setup file. Typically, the actual game loop would go into a file that I would call game. And basically, everything in here was it kind of exploded out in the global space, almost like a C program, because I was still very much a C programmer when I made a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I have this global function called loop, which was kind of the game loop. I'm not really sure. Looks like I have my here we go. Here's my event lists, which are my event list for the events for hungry. So as soon as the game starts, I queue up that you're going to be hungry in so many minutes, and I think the minutes are probably in frames, so 60 of them would be 1 second, but I'm not sure of that. And then I would queue up an event for time up. So I guess every event was followed by another event, which would basically say that you've ran out of time for the one that precedes it. And this is the actual little game loop. So while the game is running, I just call input, processing, and draw screen. And this little special if statement here was just something to make the game frame skip if the computer was too slow to render everything. And believe it or not, back then that would happen quite a bit. You'd run this on a computer that wasn't fast enough to draw that small amount of graphics. So input was just all the stuff that mapped the keyboard to what should happen. So when you hit up, left, down, and right, I'd move the man around and the map around and scroll it. The menu choice function was something that wrapped my little window for picking a menu choice for up and down. It looks like back when I wrote this, I was pretty stupid. And it looks like when I go into these menu choice functions, they're actually modal, meaning they, I don't know how this is supposed to work on this Linux program. Menu choice probably doesn't live in here. But yeah, it looks like these things actually do not exit back to the game loop, but instead run their own sub loop, which is really bad practice. But at the time, I wasn't a good enough programmer to juggle those two things at the same time. This is everything that's ran every frame for the entire game. The processing for the whole shebang. Timer bars, I would process all of those. This was kind of neat. This is back when I was just learning how to use the STL in C++. This syntax is a disaster by modern standards. Almost nobody writes this out anymore because the new C++ standard lets you iterate through these things without having to type this out. I was also really keen on lists back then. I just had learned how linked lists work, Using linked lists from C was a giant pain because you'd have to write them yourself, but C++ built them in. And I just didn't really... Obviously, when you have such a small amount of objects, it really doesn't matter anyway. But when you start studying... hello, Philip. When you start studying data structures and theoretical asymptotic computer science, these data structures start to have really big meanings. And it's funny, like, you learn how to program when you're a kid just to want to make games, and you don't care about all this computer science crap. But then you get older and you learn these concepts. It's almost like you can't unlearn them. So you start caring about, I should use a vector even though there's only 3 things in there versus a list. The amount of time you're going to lose on the computer taking that extra bit to go out to RAM more times because of the list is non-contiguous in memory versus the amount of asymptotic complexity of adding something in the middle of a vector and having to shift the elements to the side. None of that shit matters at all when you only have less than 100 things in there, which is almost always the case when you're making a simple game. But still, I've gotten away from using lists because I've been told in computer science, data structure studying, there are almost never a reason to use these things. They're terrible in performance, which is funny. The only case I could ever think where you'd really want to use one is if you have a ton of things that you're going to be inserting and removing from the middle of. But this game worked just fine years later, or even at the time on the slower computers of that era using linked lists. So it's all kind of stupid. Anyway, I'd have a list of animations. I don't know what these are. I believe I actually have an entire animation class just for and I only used it once in the entire game, which was that one explosion, that actual sprite explosion where you see the plume of fire come up. So that's what that was. A lot of these classes I would pass between my games I'd be making at the time, so I didn't really have like a game engine per se back then. I would just take bits and pieces that worked from previous games and evolve them and migrate them into separate projects and copy them in. Much like that text window I told you about, and in this case the animation class and stuff like that. So if the house is on fire, I would do some fancy stuff for animating the tile map. This is main win. I believe this was the window that kept popping up that you would see the text animate in. So there's that. And processing was my what I used to call update methods back then. So I would call processing on it once per loop. And that processing would actually do the code to type out the fonts or the text as you'd see it animate on the screen. And when you hit enter and scroll up, all that was inside that processing to animate scrolling up of the text. Nothing else too big in here. So fading back then, which is still true now, if I wanted to fade anything to black, I would actually have to have a variable that would go between 0 and 255 that I would then use to draw a semi-transparent black square over the screen to fade it in and out. So I would actually animate that manually. If the car was present, I would process the car. Some MIDI stuff, which doesn't matter, and if the game is over, I would just do this. So there really isn't that much to this game from a high level. Draw, this is everything that draws the entire game. So this is my C++isms, coming to light. The map had a, damn it, using mat key shortcuts on a Linux virtual machine is not a smart move. So yeah, the map had a draw method. The man did, the car. The main window had one. All the status bars, which lived inside a linked list of time bars, had draw methods. All the animations had draw methods. That fading I told you about, semi-transparent rectangle, that's what draws that. If you're drunk, this comment is true. If you're drunk, I draw a copy of the back buffer, semi-transparent, using sine and cosine out of phase to make that effect. So that's how I did that. Not too much. When you look at the code, it's really not that hard. I love how I used a static variable here. That's kind of bad form, but I guess at the time, when I was younger, I cared more about the game than I did about the code and good practices, and I do kind of actually miss that because it's kind of sad that I care too much about the code now and not about making games. This just draws the clock in the upper right-hand corner, and then this is what blitzed the final back buffer to the screen. So after that, it's really just a lot of logic in the game. The part where, like, for example, if you click on something, and by click on something I really mean you would walk up to it in the game and then tap the OK button on it, like Enter or X on the controller. If you do that, I would run this function called object action and pass the sprite idea for sprite ID for what you clicked on. So I'd have one for the sink, the bathtub, the toilet, the flushing of the toilet, humping the table, or just the kitchen table, the fridge. And every time you do something, I would then run a menu choice. Programming wise, this code is a lot easier to understand, which is probably why I made the menu functions modal. But from a game loop perspective, it's a disaster to do this, but whatever. Yeah, if you go to the fridge, you can then pick which option you want to do based off of whether or not you are hungry. Can you eat if you are hungry? If the soup hasn't been eaten already, can you cook the soup? If you can cook the soup, I push events back for the soup being ready. Oh, this is kind of cool how I program this. So 4 minutes out, the soup would be ready. 6 minutes out, the soup would burn the house down and blow up, which is pretty cool. I'd freeze the man every single time I wanted to do an event, so he couldn't move while I was animating things. And freeze would just make it so that the keyboard input temporarily would not respond until you unfreeze the man. So this was basically the logic for the entire game. A lot of it was inside this function. I love how I have a function in here just called jack off. That's freaking classic. Oh, well, you wouldn't have seen anything anyway, but when you go to the computer in the master bedroom. Oh, I'm sorry, Philip. I wasn't planning on keeping this stream. I was planning on doing a more cut down version of this footage, kind of in like a more YouTube episodic thing. But I'm going to be doing this every couple weeks. I have way too many games that I made that I mostly didn't finish. So every few weeks when I get the feeling of just streaming, I'll probably do another one of these. So you're not going to miss out too much. And there's much better, more complicated games than this one out there. But yeah, you can actually go to the comp fucked is a flag for basically you fucked the computer up. So if you pick the porn option, you freeze the computer, and you can't play Pong anymore if you freeze the computer. And that would have shown up in the ending credits as one of the things you did wrong, which is pretty funny. So this is basically it from a really high level. This was fun to make. I mean, like I said, it only really took me, it was back when I used to program like a bat out of hell, at least on games. This didn't take me more than probably a few days to a week to finish, simply because I leveraged some classes that I had from other games, namely that window class. This one's crazy. I don't use this stuff anymore simply because I don't use Allegro anymore. But it's, it's a relic. I totally wouldn't program ever like this again. I mean, some of this stuff is really stupid. And all this level of pointer arithmetic back then, I used to think I was so clever, and maybe I didn't even understand what the hell I wrote. Some of this stuff would just risk a crash. I would totally program something like this different. I mean, I have a label class in my HoloLens holographic UI that has to do something similar to this, except it doesn't animate it, and I programmed it completely different than the way I do this. But at the time, this was really something I thought was awesome to have, and I used to use it in all my games and kind of, pulling around. So there was a lot to this. It doesn't seem like it, but there was for this little class. So I'm gonna play another game here if I can get it to work.